Okay, hello.
and welcome to Iloilo Business Online, a webinar series presented by Daily Guardian in partnership with the Iloilo Business Club, where we have business conversations with industry leaders about pressing issues in the country amid the pandemic. We do all of this with one simple thought in mind. We are here to help. As G.I. Joe has taught us, knowing is half the battle, and we hope to know more about our challenges and opportunities ahead with today's speaker, who happens to be celebrating his birthday today. So happy birthday, Secretary Dominguez. But before that, let's first welcome Juan Jose Hamora III, the chairman of the Iloilo Business Club, for his welcoming remarks.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Board of Trustees and members of the Iloilo Business Club, I would like to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. Today marks the first episode of the Iloilo Business Online, organized in partnership with the Daily Guardian. This is our way of continuing our business conversations with key leaders in the country about pressing issues in the industry amid the pandemic. We are indeed honored to have with us Secretary Carlos Dominguez III of the Department of Finance as guest speaker today as we discuss the fiscal resilience of the Philippines amid the pandemic. We hope with this full hour we will be able to maximize the virtual presence of our guest speaker as we understand the real picture of the country's fiscal position. We look forward to having you again in our succeeding episodes of Iloilo Business Online, and we hope that we continue to practice the minimum health standard against COVID 19. Let us help protect our family and community from the harm of the virus, and may we all work together to help our economy recover. Again, thank you and keep safe.
Thank you for your kind words, Chairman Hamora. Now let's please move on to our speaker for today. Secretary Carlo Dominguez has over 40 years of vast experience and an outstanding track record of achievements at the helm of various organizations in the public and private sectors. His expertise was born out of his experience as a shareholder, board chairman, and a member of over a dozen corporations across multi-industries such as power, agriculture, mining, banking, hospitality, real estate, and investment. Mr. Dominguez was appointed as Cabinet Secretary thrice, as Secretary of Environment and Natural Resources in 1986 to 1987, Secretary of Agriculture from 1987 to 1989, and he is currently the Secretary of Finance since 2016. Under his leadership, the Department of Finance was able to draft and introduce to the Congress the first of a series of the Duterte administration's proposed tax reform packages, known as the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion, or the TRAIN Act, less than 90 days from the time that he assumed the cabinet portfolio in July of 2016. President Rodrigo Roa Duterte signed the TRAIN Act into law on December 19, 2017. This was followed by other successes in the legislature, such as the passage of the Tax Amnesty Act, the Tobacco Tax Reform Law, and the new sin tax reform law, which raised excise taxes on alcohol and electronic cigarettes. On his watch, the Philippines' key revenue agencies, the bureaus of Internal Revenue and of Customs, also continue to achieve strong revenue growth rates. It was also under his leadership that the BIR was able to secure its largest tax settlement ever, amounting to about $600 million from a single taxpayer in Philippine history. Again, let us welcome Secretary Carlos Dominguez and wish him a happy birthday. Happy birthday, Secretary Dominguez.
Iloilo Mayor Jerry Tranyas, Iloilo City Councilor Love Baronda, Mr. Juan Jose Hamora III, Chairman of Iloilo Business Club, members of the business community, friends in the media, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with all of you today. I congratulate the Iloilo Business Club on its 30th anniversary. In the last 3 decades, Iloilo has progressed by leaps and bounds. The members of the Iloilo Business Club deserve credit for their substantial contribution to this progress. As our nation continues to fight the COVID-19 crisis, it is always good to touch base with the business community. There is much to learn from those who have skin in the game. You have been fighting in the trenches to save jobs and bring our economy back on track. The country is grateful for your efforts. The effects of this pandemic would have been much worse had it caught us in a weak fiscal position. Fortunately, President Duterte's prudent fiscal management has resulted in our ability to withstand this global crisis. Last year, we brought down our debt to GDP ratio to a historic low of 39.6%. The comprehensive tax reform program and improved tax administration ensured the public sector a reliable flow of revenues. In 2019, our revenue effort rose to 16.1% of GDP, the highest in more than 2 decades. Inflation has also remained stable and under control, averaging 3% from 2016 to 2019. This means stable prices for Filipino families. In August of this year, the inflation rate further eased to 2.4%. This is well within our target range of 2 to 4%. Our gross international reserves are at an unprecedented level of 98.6 billion US dollars as of July, sufficient for 8.9 months worth of imports. Our foreign reserves are larger than our outstanding and external debt, which stood at 81.4 billion US dollars as of March of this year. In the past, crises had pushed the Philippine peso to depreciate together with currencies of other emerging markets. Not this time. Our year to date, the Philippine peso has appreciated by 4.4% against the US dollar, matched only by the Japanese yen. Our credit ratings also have endured a tidal wave of downgrades and remained at historic highs. We were able to quickly access emergency loans from our development partners and the commercial markets at very low rates, tight spreads, and longer repayment periods. Our strong fiscal position has given us sufficient means to fight the battle and ramp up public spending to beef up our health system. The lockdowns that the government imposed in the second quarter were necessary to save lives and protect our communities. They enabled us to strengthen our prevention, testing, isolation, and treatment capacities. According to university researchers, the lockdown helped us avert an estimated 1.3 to 3.5 million infections. The Philippines mortality ratio is at 4 people per 100,000. Belgium is at 86, Spain is at 64, US is at 60, and Italy at 59 people per 100,000. Had we had the surge of infections and deaths as high as what Belgium experienced, our mortalities could have been 94,000. Our number of fatalities were the same as Spain, US, and Italy. We could have recorded between 65 and 70,000 deaths instead of 4,663 as of yesterday. Further lockdowns, however, will be even more painful for our economy and our people. We are doing our utmost to keep the virus at bay and prevent the need to reimpose lockdowns so we can all start to move around more freely and confidently. While we continue to fight COVID-19, we have to rebuild our economy. It is a condition for ensuring public health. We cannot fight a pandemic with a weak economy, nor can we restore economic vigor without solving the public health crisis. The health of our people and the strength of our economy are mutually reinforcing. The progress we have seen in our labor market after slight easing of mobility restrictions is very encouraging. Our unemployment rate in July dropped to 10% from a high of 17.7% in April when strict lockdowns were still in place. The continuous slower contraction in manufacturing production also signals rising economic activity. The value of production index showed a slower annual decline of 14.8% in July from a high of 41.2% in April. The volume of production index also shrank at a slower annual rate by 11.9% compared to the high of 38.8% in April. Our total merchandise trade further eased its negative trajectory in July. We had a slower annual decline of 18.6% after a steep 59.5% contraction in April. There is also significant improvement in the tax collection of our main revenue generating agencies. The Bureau of Customs and the Bureau of Internal Revenue exceeded their targets for August by 33% and 46% respectively. These are strong indicators that the economy is starting to recover. Improvements in our employment numbers and other economic indicators will depend on how we will continue to ease mobility restrictions. We need to open up the additional modes of public transportation that strictly adhere to health standards so that our people can get back to work. No one really knows how long this public health crisis will persist. The best case scenario is a widespread availability of a safe and effective vaccine by the middle of next year. Even then, we are not sure how quickly this will contain infections. The public health effort will be a marathon. There is no magic wand to wave away the virus. We must be prepared for a long battle. We must therefore exercise fiscal prudence to ensure that we do not run short of resources in this long game. What we are facing is a test of fiscal stamina. How a country's economy performs during COVID-19 and how quickly it can bounce back after the crisis will depend on its economic resilience. We have been consistent in our approach. We will do what is necessary, but we will not be wasteful. We are grateful that Congress recently passed a fiscally responsible Bayanihan 2. This was already signed into law by President Duterte last week. Bayanihan 2 provides funds to hire thousands of contact tracers and to support our medical workers. We will purchase safe and effective vaccines when they become available. Bayanihan 2 will help struggling businesses get back to their feet. The law extends the carryover period for net losses in 2020 and 2021 from 3 to 5 years. This will allow businesses to deduct incurred losses from tax payments for a longer period, giving them more time to set their finances in order. The infusion of capital into our government financial institutions will allow them to provide more assistance to micro and small and medium enterprises. This will have a large multiplier effect in economic activity. Every peso infused into our government financial institutions will generate around 10 times its value in credit. The additional capital will be used to protect the productive parts of our economy. The Duterte administration will continue to work with Congress on the remaining economic priority bills. These measures will make more support available for businesses, workers, and families as soon as Congress passes them. We are pushing for the swift passage of the CREATE Bill or the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act. This will provide an outright 5 percentage point reduction in corporate income tax rate for everyone as soon as it is made effective. This will help businesses continue operations and retain jobs. CREATE will enhance the flexibility of our incentive system so we can aggressively go after investments that will greatly benefit the Filipino people. We also support measures to ensure the availability of financing for businesses and the continued strength of our banks. We are seeking congressional approval for banks to dispose of non-performing loans and assets through asset management companies. FIST, or the Financial Institutions Strategic Transfer Act, proposes improved versions of the special purpose vehicles created in the early 2000s in response to the Asian financial crisis. This bill will enable banks to offload souring loans and assets, clean up their balance sheets, and extend more credit to sectors in need. We support the GUIDE Bill, or the Government Financial Institutions Unified Initiatives to Distressed Enterprises for Economic Recovery. This will enable government banks to form a special holding company that will infuse equity into strategically important firms facing insolvency. We also seek to provide greater support to the agriculture sector by increasing credit access to the whole agricultural value chain. The timely passage of the 2021 national budget is crucial for our economic recovery. This will provide us with the tools necessary to rebuild our economy. We are also committed to pursue the remaining tax reform packages that will allow a simpler, fairer, and more efficient tax system. As we ensure financing support for our enterprises, our bounce back strategy centers on sustaining the Build program. Investing in sound infrastructure has the largest multiplier effect in the economy. It creates jobs, fires up consumption, and spurs productive activity. Even before the public health crisis, Visayas has already become a major growth center and contributor to our overall economy. We have witnessed rapid growth in various sectors in the region due to massive investments in infrastructure. Recent infrastructure developments in Iloilo underscore the commitment of the Duterte administration to forge ahead with our Build program despite the pandemic. In June of this year, the Department of Transportation inaugurated expansion projects of the Port of Estancia and the Iloilo Commercial Port Complex. The strategic projects will address the local and foreign shipping demands in the country and boost regional interconnectivity. We do not know exactly how long it will take to beat this pandemic, but we remain confident that we will win back our growth momentum by next year. A lot will depend on whether the government and the business sector can work together to revive consumer confidence and domestic demand. I ask enterprises to return to the economic frontline by innovating operations and taking advantage of digital technologies for the new economy. We have a future to win. We are not taking the threat posed by COVID-19 pandemic lightly. The government is handling this crisis in a prudent and decisive manner. The legislature passed fiscally responsible measures that we can implement within our means. We have our act together. The Duterte administration will not rest until we have prevailed over this extraordinary challenge. Thank you.
So COVID is a test of fiscal stamina and the government has its act together. This echoes the previous webinar that Daily Garden has had with IBC, and it has showed us that we are in fact in a strong position to recover after the pandemic. It's comforting to know again that the future is not as bleak as it may seem despite the conditions and circumstances right now. This tells me personally that as long as we can outlast this pandemic and we can make it through, we are in fact projected to economically recover. For the audience, again, please do not hesitate to ask questions in the comments on our live broadcast. And the same goes for our participants in the Zoom meeting as we will now move on to the Q&A segment of today's webinar. So if you have any questions or if you have any comments, please feel free to send it in the Zoom meeting. And at the same time, please comment it on our live broadcast. I believe Secretary Dominguez is now ready to entertain questions with regard to his talk just now.
I'm ready.
Here we have a question, Secretary, from Mr. Rafael Certeza. A good number of sources have suggested opening up the mining industry as a means of jumpstarting employment and government revenue. In this connection, what are the chances that EO 79 will be repealed?
Well, we completely agree that the mining sector has to be looked at now to revive employment because mines are generally located in the outlying areas where there are a few other job opportunities. So I am the co-chairman of the Mining Industry Development Council, and we are pushing for the reopening of more mines that have been idled in this past few months. So again, we fully support that move. Thank you.
And I believe now, or for our next question, Secretary, we have Ma'am Roan, who will be, I believe, asking her question via Zoom.
Good afternoon, Secretary Dominguez, and happy birthday. This is Director Roan Bagal of NEDA Region 6. We all know that one of the strategies for our economy is really pursuing our build projects, one of which is our very own Panay Guimaras Negros bridges. And in a recent meeting with DPWH, they intimated that they are now tapping the Korean financing for this project. Is this something that is already being discussed? And may we know what will trigger the discussion of this financial support coming from the Korean Exim Bank for the bridge? Thank you.
The Panay Guimaras Negros Bridge Project Phase 1, which is the Panay Guimaras section, is part of NEDA board approved revised list of infrastructure projects as of the 19th of August. So it's really in place. Upon the request of the DPWH, a loan from the KEXIM, which is the Korean government Export-Import Bank is being explored to finance this project. KEXIM is currently procuring a third-party consultant to review the feasibility study submitted by DPWH and to conduct supplemental studies if necessary. The Panay Guimaras Negros Bridge is included as a priority project in the pipeline of KEXIM financing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Director Roan. We have here another question from Joseph Marzan, a Daily Guardian reporter. In the wake of COVID-19, are the Department of Finance's current fiscal policies harmonized with our health policies? And were these also consulted with public health experts?
Yes, absolutely. We are totally in sync with the moves in the health sector. Basically, the health sector has been in consultation with people, both health experts internationally and domestically. So we're fully in sync with them, and certainly we are pushing for more and more opening of the economy. One thing that has not been very clear in the how would you say, in the communications is at what level should we become worried. Okay, we are proposing that the level of if the level of people getting sick and needing hospitalization is below 70% of the hospital capacity, then we should proceed. However, if it exceeds 70% of the healthcare capacity to cure, then we should start thinking of reviewing how open the transportation or the economy should be. I think we should be very clear on a cut-off point. You know, the way forward is essentially to manage risk. You know, when you have a risk that you're facing, there are two ways to address it. Don't take the risk, or you manage the risk. All of you in business know that in whatever business you are, you have a risk, right? Whatever risk there is. And you rely on yourselves to manage that risk, either with improved capital, improved technology, or just essentially your experience. So that is what we are trying to move forward, not avoiding the risk of infection, but managing it so that our economy can open. You know, if you keep your economy shut, there is another risk, and that risk is people don't have jobs, they don't have money, and how will they handle their other illnesses, for instance? You know, they can get the flu, or they can have diabetes, or they can have heart disease. So believe me, opening the economy and managing the risk of infection is the way forward.
Thank you, Secretary. Are there any questions that we have for Secretary Dominguez?
Yes, of course. We talk now. Secretary Dominguez, good afternoon.
Hi.
I am Mr. Laison from the Laison Group of Companies. My question is this, sir. How has the revenue generating capacity of the Department of Finance been affected by way of the Bucor and BIR been affected by COVID-19?
Okay, let me put it this way, okay? Against last year's collection, we are around 12% down, okay? Against our original projections for this year, which we made in December, we are around 25% down, okay? However, sometime in May, we revised our projections because it was obvious that our revenues were being eroded very fast. Against that, we are actually now around 30% ahead. So we are doing not as bad as I expected. And the real number we look at is how much did we collect last year and how much are we collecting this year. And the differential is we're down about 12%.
Thank
Can I
you,
do a
Secretary.
follow-up question, sir? May I be allowed? Am I allowed to do a follow-up question?
Yes, yes.
Go ahead.
What are your prospects for 2021 in terms of revenue generating capacity of the BIR and Bucor?
In 2021, we have submitted our budget, and definitely it's going to be okay. Let's put it this way: our highest revenue level was experienced in 2019, and that was around 3.1 billion pesos. A trillion, about 3.1 trillion pesos in 2019. This year, we think we are going to collect about 2.6 trillion. Next year, we think 2021, we are estimating 22.7 trillion pesos. It is only in 2022 we expect that we will get back to 3 trillion peso level of revenues.
Thank you, Secretary. I think Mr. Lyson is already finished with his follow-up. Our next question is, with the approval of the recent approval of the Bayanihan 2 Act, how will the bill impact provisions for the 2020 and 2021 national budget?
It has no impact on those budgets immediately because it's really designed for until the end of the year. So this is additional spending until the end of this year. However, there are some projects that will spill over to 21, but those are already taken care of in the 2021 budget.
Thank you, Secretary. Our next question coming from Zoom is from Mr. Terence Oigonco. Up to what percentage of the GDP is the Department of Finance comfortable in new debt availment?
In what?
In new debt availment.
New debt availment. Okay. Let's put it this way, okay? There are two numbers that we are watching very, very carefully, okay? And the first one is the fiscal deficit. In other words, how much are we going to increase our fiscal deficit? In 2019, our fiscal deficit was 3.2% of GDP. We expect our 2020 fiscal deficit to rise to around 9.6% of our GDP. So how are we measuring this? Okay, we want to be in the middle of our peer countries in the rating peers and in the middle of our neighbors. So we think that around 9.6% deficit is going to be something very, very manageable for us. We are, of course, planning to bring down the level of that deficit to around 8.5%, from 9.6% to 8.5% in 2021 and further to 7.5% in 2022. So that's the first number we're looking at. The second number we're looking at, and you are correct, what is the total debt to GDP that we are we are looking at. Number one, our total debt to GDP in at the end of 2019 was a historic low. It was below 40%. So it was 39.6%. We estimate that our debt to GDP will rise probably to something like a little over 50%, maybe 53 or 54% by the end of 2020, and to 58% by 2021, and to 59% by 2022. But again, we hope to be able to grow faster than 6.5% next year, so that debt to GDP percentage will go down. The difference now in the debt to GDP as compared to say what it was in the early 2000s is that the cost of money at that time was very high, probably 7 or 8% per annum. Now our cost of money is quite low. We are probably hitting 2 or 3% per annum when we borrow abroad. So our debt service capacity is quite loose.
Thank you, Secretary. We have another question from Mr. Oigongko. Now that the Bayanihan 2 has been signed, how soon will the money be downloaded to the different agencies, considering that we only have up to December 19th to implement this law?
Well, immediately, let me tell you, the funds are immediately available, okay? What we are waiting for, our department has submitted already the IRR for the implementation of the law. In fact, we submitted it prior to its signing, and Malacanang is just finalizing the IRR, and as soon as that IRR is approved by Malacanang, we will begin the downloading of the amounts in the law.
Thank you, Secretary. I'm curious as to what is the revenue mix of the allocation for the implementation of the Bayanihan 2 Act, and what is the country's current debt situation at the moment?
Say that again. What is the
revenue mix of the allocation for the implementation of the Bayanihan 2 Act?
Oh, the revenue mix.
That situation.
Revenue mix essentially for the Bayanihan 2 is what we have saved. Okay. First of all, what we have saved or what we have collected outside of taxes. For your information, during this year, we have collected a lot of dividends from our government-owned corporations. So that has contributed almost 130 billion pesos to our coffers. Normally, in 2019, we collected around 60 billion pesos in dividends. This year, we collected around 150 billion. So the large part of that will come from the dividends collected. The other part is we had estimated a higher interest rate to be paid for our debt service, but we were pleasantly surprised that interest rates have dropped. So we have some leeway there from the budget. So from those two sources, basically is where we will get the 165 billion pesos additional to be spent.
Thank you, Secretary. But as for the allocation of the Bayanihan 2 Act, in case the information is readily available to you there, how much of it is actually allocated for Western Visayas?
I'm not sure I know that answer, okay? I don't think it was allocated according to regions. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. 50 billion of the 165 is supposed to go for additional capital for land bank and DBP. And that additional capital is to allow them to start operating like a wholesale bank. In other words, if there are loans that are provided in Iloilo by your local bank there, a rural bank or what, we can buy that loan from the bank, and the bank with the proceeds can make more loans. So we haven't allocated exactly according to region. This is more allocated according to activity.
Thank you, Secretary. We have a question from Director Bakal. Her question is, are there funds allocated for the Balik Probinsya program and the Bagong Pag-asa program?
I believe so. I don't have the law in front of me right now, but I believe there were some funds for that, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Secretary. But what tax measures, especially those that will impact MSMEs, are being advocated or will be implemented by the Department of Finance to increase the revenue of the country?
Actually, in the CREATE law, we are passing the very first revenue eroding measure. We want to reduce the corporate income tax rate from 30% to 25% for everybody, okay? Because we believe that the money, when it stays in the hands of the private sector, will be used very efficiently to create jobs, to create, to keep their employees employed, and to innovate. So we want to reduce our, actually, we want to reduce our corporate income tax rate. This also makes us more competitive with the other ASEAN countries. As you know, the Philippines has the highest corporate income tax rate in ASEAN at 30%. So that's why we want to reduce it, and everybody will benefit, including, especially, sorry, not including, especially the small and medium enterprises. Look, I'll tell you, okay, how many of you have restaurants in Iloilo? Who's operating restaurants there? I'm sure some of your businessmen are operating restaurants, correct? And I'm sure you're paying corporate income tax rates of 30%. Now, you are being unfairly treated because some companies, and most of them are very large corporations, are getting tax credits because they can apply with the BOI or whatever. So we want to reduce the rate for everybody, and that's in the CREATE bill.
Thank you, Secretary. We have a question here from NEDA 6ARD Aresio Casing. Local governments have been seen to be critical frontliners in the fight against COVID-19. With the Mandanas case soon to be implemented on 2022, what are the Department of Finance's views on additional allocation to LGUs?
Well, if we are to implement the Mandanas case, the allocation to the LGUs will increase. Now, we just hope that obviously we cannot continue doing business as usual. With the additional revenues, we will have to pass on additional costs to the areas. We cannot continue spending, say, of 100% for the local hospitals that will benefit the local regions. Probably together with the additional funds will be additional responsibility. Now the question is, and this is a very crucial question, can the local governments efficiently spend that money? Can they actually cover those costs? I'll give you an example. When I was in the Department of Agriculture in the time in the administration of Cory Aquino, there was a law that was passed that devolved two functions to the local governments. One is agriculture and the other one is healthcare. After reviewing the 30 years experience, has agriculture actually improved after it was devolved? That's a question. Everybody has to answer that. Has the actual healthcare improved after the local government code was passed, where healthcare was devolved to the local governments? You know, this Mandana's law says we have to do this. But as a finance secretary, I want to know if that money is going to be used right.
I understand, Secretary. We have a question next. Our next question comes from Mr. Arsenio Rafael III. He asks, the Monetary Board has reduced interest rates by 200 basis points since the start of 2020. However, commercial banks have brought down their rates by only 50 to 100 basis points. Do you have any insight or comment as to this development?
You know, your private relationship with your bank is your private relationship with your bank, okay? We do not interfere with how you deal with your bank. We just set the stage where it will cost the banks less to source funds from the government sources. So now it's how you negotiate with them. This is called private sector initiative. We cannot do everything for you, okay? You have to deal with your banks on your own. We have set the stage. We have made the liquidity available. Now you guys have to do your job, okay?
Thank you, Secretary. We again have a question from Mr. Terence Gonco. Is Bayanihan 2 law passed? What else can local LGUs through local ordinances do to help MSMEs and local businesses survive this pandemic?
Well, again, it will depend on the particular locality. I'll give you an example. You know, under my department, we have an organization called the MDFO, the Municipal Development Loan Fund. Okay, and also the BLGF, which is the Bureau of Local Government Finance. Our calculation is that by the Bureau of Local Government Finance is that as a whole, all the borrowing capacity of local governments, their ability to take loans is around 160 billion pesos. Do you know how much loans all local governments have taken up? Less than half, around 70 billion. So there is availability of funds. You can borrow. We will support you. DBP and Land Bank are open for that, but the local governments do not want to borrow. How can we solve that problem? That is for you local citizens to examine the policies of your local legislatures and the policies of your local governments. There is 160 billion pesos available for borrowing capacity, and yet local governments have used less than half of that. Now they want more money from Mandanas. Why don't they use that first?
I understand, Secretary. Thank you. Another question is, what innovations are being implemented or will be implemented to improve the efficiency of our tax collection during this time of pandemic?
Well, as you probably know, you can file your taxes already online. And actually, if you notice, there are no long lines anymore in the BIR offices when you're filing taxes. You can actually file them online. So we are expanding that. We are also moving towards e-invoicing. And we have started that project a couple of years ago, and it's ready for pilot testing probably in a couple of months. So those are the innovations that help people pay their taxes and help BIR monitor their performance.
Thank you, Secretary. As we start to wind down with these questions, I have just a few more. In the aspect of financial market development, What opportunities are you currently considering or exploring to help the country's economy recover?
In what aspect is that? Capital markets?
Financial market development, Secretary.
Okay, in the financial market development, as I mentioned, there are two items in the legislature that we are looking at. Okay, number one is the FISC law, which will allow banks to offload their bad assets tax-free. Okay, and encourage them to monetize their bad debt. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, again, we are trying to get the guide bill passed, which is going to allow the Philippine government banks to organize a company that will be able to address not the liquidity problems, but the solvency problems. You know, banks can address liquidity problems. They cannot address solvency. So this is an area that we are open, that we would want the legislature to give us the ammunition to save the capital market. I'm also the chairman of the Capital Market Development Council, and we are moving very fast with our roadmap to making the capital market more more inclusive, so that it will be easier for small and medium companies to access the bond market through the Philippine dealing system or the Philippine Stock Exchange. In fact, there's a new regulation that came out in the issued by the SEC that has mandated the increase in number of independent directors in the PSE from 3 to 5. So we want more independent directors there, so that they will look precisely at increasing the inclusiveness of PSE.
Thank you, Secretary. I believe this will be the final question. What programs can be availed of by the local government units with the Department of Finance to improve collection and spending efficiency?
You know, we appoint the local treasurers, okay? And I make it a point that the local treasurer and the mayor get along, okay? If they don't get along, I much rather transfer the local treasurer. So we are also that's number one, make sure that they are in sync. Number two, we have also, oh, by the way, this is funny story. When I came into the department, I asked, why don't we have a training program for treasurers and assistant treasurers? And they said, oh, by the way, we have a law that allows us to set up a tax academy. And that is precisely to train treasurers in the municipalities. That law was passed under the administration of Gloria Arroyo, but was never implemented by Noynoy Aquino's administration. So we are implementing this now. We have a board already, and we are actually doing online training for tax administrators, particularly treasurers and assistant treasurers.
Thank you, Secretary. Now, as we end the program, we'd like to ask your final insights and your final message to our business leaders here in Iloilo City.
Thank you. You know, our real problem right now with this COVID is how to give people the confidence that, you know, if they go out and they start their regular activities or go back to work, they are not going to get infected, or if they get infected, there is a way of curing it. Okay, so that essentially is really the nub of the problem here. You know, COVID destroyed the demand, the aggregate demand in the Philippines, because people just couldn't move around. And because they're scared to get sick, they're worried about their jobs, they're not spending so much. And you know, our economy is driven about 75% by consumption. So it's important for us to start encouraging people to be confident that spending is okay. So for the mall owners, for instance, in Iloilo, I would suggest that you come out with a public information campaign telling the people that you're going to be safe in the mall, okay? That they take your temperature, that everybody wears a mask, that your chances of getting infected are very small. So that is number one. So let's create a bubble of confidence in Iloilo so that people can resume their regular lives and resume their jobs. So that's, I think, what the local business can do in your area. For instance, your hotels, you can start opening up for staycations, okay? You know, people don't want to travel outside Iloilo. So let's talk to your local governments and open local hotels so that people can do a vacation in the hotel. You know, I'm I'm a little tired of staying in my house. Okay, so we're looking where we can have a nice weekend, etc. So again, that is very important. The other important thing also, I think you should encourage, Iloilo is a very agriculturally productive area. Uh, Agriculture is food has a very, how would you say, very inelastic demand. Okay, people gonna eat. Okay, so the more you produce there and the more you make available for people to consume, that is an area that the local governments, who actually have the responsibility for agricultural production, should focus on. So confidence and agriculture production for food. That's my suggestion to you.
Thank you, Secretary, and thank you for your time and indulgence in uh, being with us today with this webinar. Again, it's your birthday, so happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
Still at work.
Anytime. I'm always willing to speak.
Still at work, still at work. So anyway, again, thank you for your time and indulgence. And for me personally, my personal takeaway is that everything must be in balance in economics, in fiscal management, in work, and in the following of the health standards. We must remain confident and make sure that we outlast this pandemic because we are in a great position economically as a country to recover from COVID-19. This again has been the Iloilo Business Online, a webinar series presented by Daily Guardian in partnership with the Iloilo Business Club, where we have business conversations with industry leaders about pressing issues in the country amid the pandemic. We do all this with one simple thought again that we are here to help. We hope that you have learned a lot from our finance secretary today, and we are all honored to hear his thoughts and his insights. For our next episode, we will be having Governor Benjamin Jokno, PhD of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. I am proud to say that he is my fraternity brother, to talk about the role of the banking sector in Philippine economic recovery. So we'll see you again next time on Iloilo Business Online, presented by the Iloilo Business Club. Thanks for watching. Peace.
Thank you again.
To our Zoom participants, thank you for being with us today in today's webinar. Thank you for your engaging comments. And we hope to see you again in future episodes of Iloilo Business Online. We hope to do more to help our Iloilo business leaders here with the careful collaborations and confident partnerships in order for us to evolve and innovate and move forward in this pandemic. Thank you again for your time and being with us here today. I will also be leaving now.